Okay, friends, welcome back to another exciting Devlog episode. So, this week has been fun. I've been working on multiplayer, like I said. I kind of understand what's going on, and I've made what feels like small amounts of progress, but it's progress, and it's probably just because it's something I've never really have messed with before, and it's kind of difficult for me, at least. Okay, so here we have two clients, so left and right. I put together a little smaller map just to kind of focus on replicating like the different just player tanks specifically. I've messed with like the AI tanks a bit, but I just really did want to focus on the player tanks and make sure I get that all working well. So this little map here, yeah, it's just it's like a little game where you can just run around and shoot like artillery shells at each other, like that.
Command tank destroyed.
Explode and
respawning soon. Command tank destroyed.
Respawning.
Command tank destroyed. Respawning soon. Command tank destroyed. Respawning soon.
It's just gonna keep spawning there. So anyway, yeah, as you can see, I'm moving in this top left one, and that's being replicated on the right. All my artillery shells, the explosions are also replicated. If I come down to the bottom right one, vice versa. Movement, barrel rotation, artillery shell, projectile movement, that's all replicated. Yeah, the movement wasn't too bad. Honestly, you just kind of check a few boxes and it kind of works. A lot of the work was with the user interface. I didn't really have that set up to work correctly with multiplayer at all. How buildings were placed was honestly kind of difficult. So as you can see, I have a building selected on my top left, and it doesn't show up on the top right, or on the bottom right, until I place it somewhere.
Building.
And then it shows up, and
building complete.
It gets built on both. The kind of like opacity decrement isn't being replicated yet, but so you can see that worked, and now I have build radius, so I can place a rocket turret
building complete.
or something, and that's gonna start blowing that guy up. So that kind of works. It targets the right guy. So I got teams
destroyed. Respawning
set up. I can run away from that rocket turret now. And now it's targeting this guy, which is silly, even though they're on the same team, but it's not doing damage. So obviously there's something to fix. So that is the basics of what I've got replicated here. I guess, yeah, so if I build an observation post over here,
building,
you'll see it shows up now on that guy's screen. So
building complete.
Yeah, replication. This is going to be a short and sweet one. I feel like really what I have left to do is replicating like the AI tanks and their targeting and stuff to work correctly. Because like one thing you might have noticed there was that rocket turret was shooting on one screen but not on the other, and I've just kind of ignored that reality, and I'm going to have to stop ignoring it soon. So some just quick notes if you want to know some of the weeds and some of the pain I've been through. So this diagram here is very useful. This kind of shows where things exist. So I'm just using a client-server model where one player is the client and the server, and every other player will just be an additional client. Pretty common for Unreal Engine games. Either that or having a dedicated server, but we're not going to go there. So I had to learn actually, what these things are, like the game state and the player state and the game mode. Hadn't really messed with those at all before now, but I've had to move some code around. I found that the player controller is a good place to perform logic because it is aware of the actual character, so that'd be like your tank or something, Um, it's aware of the player state and the game state. The game state would be like your score. Your player state might be like your username, or you could maybe put stuff like your health on there or your experience, something like that. Um, this player controller is really you whenever you're playing a game. So like it's what handles your inputs, and then the player controller just moves your pawn or your character around. And your player controller also is what owns the user interface elements that has up displays and stuff. So like before I was like having this has a display logic actually like construct buildings and such whenever you select like a building from the menu, but the UI can't communicate with the server at all. Um, so really, you want to be like spawning. Well, you want to be spawning structures on the server, and then the server will replicate those to the clients. That's the same for like projectiles, um, other tanks, anything, basically anything that comes to exist in the world. That you want replicated. You need to make sure that that is spawned from the server, and then multicast out to every connected client. You need to make sure you have those actors set to replicate, so the game engine knows that those are things that it needs to keep updated on the clients. So that's a lot of it. Just replacing some code, sometimes where it's at, and then like doing these RPC events where basically it's like, hey, you want to spawn a bullet? Well, I used to just spawn a bullet from the tank character, for instance, but now I create a custom event on the tank character that tells the server to create the bullet. Then the server creates the bullet, and it multicasts that out to all the clients so that the clients all have their own copy of it along with the server. And then the server, handles those updates and keeping things in sync between all the clients. But yeah, I would spend like hours trying to get specifically like the artillery projectile. The normal projectiles were working fine. The ones that just go in a straight line and don't have gravity, but for some reason I wasn't able to get these ballistic projectiles to replicate correctly. It would always just try and shoot it at 0, in the game world. It wasn't like updating the cursor location for each client. And sometimes you just gotta step back and go on a bike ride and think about it. And I went on a lot of bike rides this week because it was very beautiful out, 70 degrees, which didn't help me always spend as many hours on this as I should have. But also, it helped clear my mind sometimes. So maybe it's a net win. Okay, so here in the tank character, the spaghettification is getting even worse because I had to move some stuff. But let's say we want to fire something. Okay, so here's my check for a ballistic arc. Taking this hit location, which is where the mouse cursor is on the ground, and then you get out the fire velocity and gravity out. And my problem was here in the fire event, this fire velocity was always coming out as 0, and that's just because like I was trying to, I'll drag this variable from my writing the game, drag this variable from here, and I would silly me, put that in. Well, that's the initial velocity, but you get the point. Like I was just dragging in variables from the side here, and the problem is at this point, so this is the RPC to run on the server, and then that just goes to this one, which is the one that's multicast. So now the server is running this this event. So the problem is I would just, grab this variable, and at this point, I'm pretty sure I would just be getting like the server's copy of this fire velocity, but this fire velocity was computed on the client. So the server, it would always just be 0, 0, 0 for this vector. And it took me a while to figure that out. You just got to pass it in. It's pretty simple. You just got to make sure you pass it in from the client when you do this call, and then you pass it in to the multicast from the server, so that the server has, they're both fire velocity, but a fire velocity here to here is not the same as a fire velocity here to here to here. And I think the visual programming is it abstracts that. If I was just doing C++, I feel like that would be more obvious. But, from here you just see stuff on the page, and it's just hard to wrap your mind around with this whole client server model that, just it's not the same. It's not, you can't just do that. And it's even hard for me to explain. But you just got to pass it in from the client whenever you're doing these server calls, which makes sense. It's just hard to remember with that visual programming, for me at least. And then I can just spend a few minutes talking about the buildings. So that was complicated. And then again, on a bike ride today, I actually figured this out. I was looking at the cherry blossoms, and then it occurred to me I'm being a big dum-dum. What I was doing was I was initially from the build menu, I had a function in the player controller to create a structure on the server. Because used to I would just spawn an actor from the build menu. But then I'm like, well, I got to spawn that actor from the server because I want it to replicate. Which is true in the end. But then I ran into the problem where, like, I only want this to, like, the movement and everything to replicate across all players once someone actually places a structure. Like, if I'm playing the game as the as one of the players here, like, at this point, I don't want this thing replicated around. I only want it to show up whenever I actually place it, because it's not actually placed until the player places it somewhere, which is what's happening now. So the problem was I would create the structure from the server, and it would replicate, and everyone could see it before it was placed. Now, there is a way to hide an actor from its owner, which would be useful for, like, having a first-person shooter or something where you don't want your character to see its own player model, which makes sense. But I wanted the inverse of that. I wanted myself to see it and no one else to see it. And I don't think there's anything built in for that. So I would do, like, a lot of weird stuff where I would, I would create it on the server, but I would set it not to replicate until I placed it, after which I would tell it to replicate. But that just didn't really work out well, and I spent a long time trying to make that work, and I think it didn't work because the client didn't have its own copy of the building at that point, because I told it not to replicate. So the only thing that owned it was the server, and one of the players is the server, so it would work for that player, but it wouldn't work for the remote client because they're not the server. So in that respect, you get, like, inconsistent behavior between the client server and just the remote client. Anyway, on my bike ride, I'm like, okay, what I do is I just go back to doing what I was doing before, which was to spawn the building from the build menu, from the local controller. So, like, the server doesn't get the building. And this is good because we don't want the building replicated. We only want the building replicated whenever it's actually placed. So then in the building, I had to go in here and basically, like, all this spaghetti is for placing, like moving the structure around and making sure it's a valid place to put it and stuff like that. And then once we get to, you hit the left mouse button, you call this function, and that actually places it. And now what it actually does is this is where we call on the server to create the structure, and then we just destroy the structure that was spawned by the user interface earlier. So the one that we've been dragging around to place somewhere, we destroy that because we're just going to make a new one that the server owns, and this one is going to be replicated, and we're just setting some variables to we're setting can place to true on spawn, and also that it's an outpost. So we're setting some variables on spawn that will, back in our building on its event begin play, at the end of it, we'll check here to see if we can place it. And if it's true, this means that this is one that the server has spawned. So then we go to 6.1 after the L left mouse button building, and we decrement our opacity. And so then I just had to like kind of, this used to be in the 6 function, now it's in the 6_1 function, because I had to do this logic after it's actually placed. So we just we actually just destroy the old actor in the middle of the old function 6, create a new actor owned by the server, and then just carry on right where we left off with the old actor. And it pretty much works. So that is amazing. Okay, that's it for this devlog. Sorry it was a couple days late. I just wanted to really get that building replication working before I published the next devlog. Might be a bit of a delay for the next one, mainly because I'm going on vacation to Mexico on Friday, and I'm going bike packing tomorrow, so I won't really be working on this much for the next week and a half. I'll probably work on some like 3D models for some of the tanks, and maybe a building or two. I can do that on my laptop that actually works as a laptop, because I don't need to make a game. I just need to make 3D models, which is easy. So I might do that like on the plane or something while I'm traveling. But thanks for listening, and I will catch you again in a couple weeks.